to date. Joining us right now is Doug Barry. Doug Barry is going to be on talking about this idea of situational awareness and being prepared. I'm thinking of the idea of, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. Good morning to you, Doug Barry.
Good morning, Adrian. How you doing?
Praise be to God, I'm alive. It's a blessing to be here
Amen.
today.
Amen.
Now,
Yes.
Doug, they all over the United States. There's been all sorts of craziness going on. I just have seen so many videos of people being ambushed, getting beat up. I've seen videos that was a couple weeks ago. There was that guy, that leftist, who he very tragically was stabbed in the chest because he was trying to confront some crazy person. And we have these kind of stories happening all the time. And the thing that saddens me the most about it, when I see these pictures, videos, things like that, the vast majority of the time, a simple, common sense situational awareness would have saved these people's lives. They would have never been in that situation to begin with, or if they were, they would have been able to get out of it without having gone into a confrontation. So I'm going to start there. Doug, what would you tell people who are trying to live their life, go about their life, and they live in places that might be a little dangerous, major cities all across the world? Talk to me about situational awareness.
You know, one of the first things when it comes to any kind of self-defense or any kind of situation where you might have to, as you mentioned, get into some sort of a conflict, or at least it's in the air. Is your best weapon is really your brain. It's paying attention to your surroundings. The idea of situational awareness simply means that you kind of keep your head on a swivel. You look left, you look right, you pay attention to everything around you. Many situations, as you mentioned, can be averted by that and by simply knowing what to do, very basics at the beginning. For example, you're walking down the sidewalk, if your head's down on your phone, your likelihood of being looked at as a target by a bad guy goes up tremendously. Distraction is definitely the opposite of situational awareness, and distraction is killing us in many ways because a lot of people have fallen into I've got to constantly be checking my phone, the FOMO, fear of missing out, so they're constantly on their phone. You see this all the time, walking through airports, walking down sidewalks. A story years ago, sad story about a college-age student, a young woman who was walking down a sidewalk, New York City, fell into an open manhole. And when the family tried to sue the city explained that the manhole was surrounded by several orange cones because men were working on the manhole at the time. She didn't even see the orange cones. Another story of a teenage girl steps out off of a curb during a red light, standing next to her younger brother, steps into oncoming traffic because she's paying attention to her phone. She doesn't recognize the traffic. For whatever reason, she thought it was time to start walking, and she did. Those are simple examples of allowing distraction. We see it with distracted driving, people on their phones, texting, in particular with the heads down. And everybody pretty much can see this as they're just driving down the road. And so these are examples of simply being distracted. So you put that into a context of you're walking through a parking lot and a bad guy might be, casing someone. And for the ladies out there in particular, realize that FBI statistics have pointed out for years that on average in America, every 2 minutes, roughly, a woman is assaulted or attacked. The number one place that normally happens is, for example, a grocery store parking lot. And it's oftentimes because a bad guy's waiting and pays attention to a woman going in and then pays attention as she's coming out. And if she looks distracted, she becomes more of a target. Now, this is something that they themselves have said. Many who have been caught, will admit, yeah, we look for people that are not paying attention to their situation. And those are in normal everyday places sometimes. You're talking about driving down a road or a grocery store, or, it could be an office parking lot, or even going into a restroom. That's another place where, unfortunately, sadly, and tragically, women are oftentimes assaulted, is even in a restroom. And it's, again, goes back to when you come in, look left, look right, pay attention, you see something that doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, doesn't pass the smell test, or, in particular, gut feeling. Many people that are attacked or assaulted or robbed or in any way hurt oftentimes will say, I had a feeling before that this guy, this person, this situation wasn't right. But again, that's a situational awareness type of thing. God does give us oftentimes a bit of an instinct. And we've got to pay more attention to that and just simply not let ourselves get distracted. And the last thing I'll say before I pass back is the quote from one of the old Karate Kid movies is, the best block is to simply not be there. So it's avoiding situations that just your gut tells you, or your senses tell you, or your common sense tells you, this just isn't a good place to be. All of that is paying attention to your situation and being aware of it. And that's one of your best self-defense weapons right there.
Right, for sure. And one of the things that is really sad is that people have been basically brainwashed into ignoring their common sense because they're told you don't want to stereotype. Oh, just because there's some shady people that are wearing hoods over their head at middle of the night, hanging around the gas station where the lights are dim, doesn't mean they're bad people. They could just be nice citizens that are hanging around. You don't want to judge people. And that's kind of the mentality that's being taught to people, and it's causing them to ignore their common sense. They just say, hey, that seems a little sketchy. I may get gas at the next gas station instead. And that's very sad. Now, we have about 3 minutes before we go to a break, and I want to ask about the de-escalating a situation, because sometimes, you might be in a city that has some people who have mental health issues, and they may confront you, they may come after you, or maybe someone gets angry with you, you're in a road rage situation. How do you de-escalate the situation?
The first thing is keep your emotions in check. We have to understand that a lot of things that, when situations escalate, get out of hand, a lot of times it's an emotional issue more than anything. You can de-escalate by a smile. You can de-escalate by a confident attitude. It doesn't have to be a tough guy or tough woman attitude. That normally will elevate problems. And if we have that attitude that I'm going to de-escalate, but I'm prepared in case this doesn't go the way it should, I'm prepared. That shows that I have a confidence to myself, but I'm also going to talk through this calmly. I always say anybody married longer than a week knows that you can elevate a problem in a marriage just like you can in a street confrontation or parking lot or something of that nature by simply getting tough, getting that attitude, getting that tone of voice. But if you practice calmly talking and not in a way that belittles or tears somebody down, you're not doing it in a demeaning way, but you simply say, hey, excuse me, sorry about that, slight smile, hey, have a good day, and the gesture of your hands has a lot to do with it as well. You put your hands up in a posture that open palm that basically says, hey, everything's good, don't worry about it. If it's a face-to-face confrontation, if your hands are up protecting yourself, they're out in front of you, but your palms are open. That speaks through body language that I'm not looking for trouble. I'm looking to calm this down. But again, tone of voice, a bit of a smile, eye-to-eye contact, showing confidence. Those are great ways to simply say, I'm not here to cause trouble. Let's just take a deep breath. Let's slow down, even slow down the way we communicate here just a little bit so that we don't let emotion start to dictate the situation.
Yes, for sure. And I know in one particular situation I saw on Twitter, people, we get so much, I guess, in a positive aspect, it gives us a lot of data so we can kind of see what's going on. Somebody could have solved the problem simply by crossing the street. And I was thinking, why did they not just cross the street and get out of the situation? But nonetheless, they always told, what's the best self-defense martial art you can learn? Sprinting. We'll be right back. More with Doug Barry when we get back with more Catholic Drive Time right after this. Joining us right now is Doug Barry. You can find out his website on brcoalition.com. And it is a great website to get more information about being prepared. And I kind of want to transition over the conversation to talk about preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. A lot of people kind of call you conspiratorial, you're crazy, if you're what people might label a prepper. They have kind of as a derogatory term. But at the same time, we kind of learned our lesson during COVID where, people not having toilet paper, everybody lost their mind. They're like, oh my goodness, I have to get toilet paper. What am I going to do? And we realized that our supply chains are very delicate. A simple weather disaster, something like that, can simply put you out for a week, 2 weeks, something simple like that. And we have to be prepared. Now, I think we should be prepared for greater disasters, for larger things. But even if you think that's impossible, Adrian, we're never going to have a World War III situation or a grid down situation. None of those things are possible. That's not going to happen. but simply think about a weather crisis. Think about another kind of COVID crisis. Think about your shipments get destroyed by getting an accident on the way. What are you going to do in those situations? Doug, tell me about being prepared.
You know, you you hit that on the head. A lot of people think it's conspiratorial. A lot of people live in the normalcy bias mindset. Everything is normal. They're biased towards that. They don't feel like they need to worry about anything. We've become so comfortable, and it's great. We've got great modern advancements and technologies and all great services that are out there that really help us. Bottom line is we always feel like we can call somebody, they're going to come take care of things. And we feel like it's going to happen right away. It's just something we've been conditioned to believe. Kids are conditioned growing up now with a smartphone that they can have everything at their fingertips immediately. We can call 911 if there's an emergency. Someone's going to come out and help us. It even goes to the point where if there's some sort of natural disaster on a large scale, hurricane, tornado, you name it, FEMA will show up or National Guard will show up. Someone will bring me what I need, and they'll take care of these things. Now, it's great that we have a lot of these emergency services and a lot of these areas can be covered, but it isn't realistic to think that it's going to happen so well all the time. I was giving a talk in Florida at a men's group many years ago. I was talking about, in particular, awareness and self-defense and some of these issues to a group of men, and there was a man sitting in the corner, older gentleman. At the end, he commented. He said he wanted to talk. He looked a little intense throughout the talk, and finally he said, I'm a retired Long Island detective, and I can tell you that everything Doug's talking about is correct and it makes sense. You have to be prepared. For example, he said, when you call the police in a crisis situation, he said 95% of the time when we show up, we're there for two reasons. One, we're there to take the report. Number two, we're there to clean up the mess. You have to be ready to handle things on your own, and that's in a crisis of some sort of assault or break-in or some sort of attack. But when it comes to what you just described, some of those things we know, we've seen over and over, from natural disasters to the COVID example, perfect example of what happened there. The baby food formula shortage that happened about a year ago, just over a year ago, was another perfect example of a supply chain issue that sent many parents into a very desperate situation because some of them had children who had a particular type of formula need because of allergy. And they were online bartering, doing what they could to try to get the word out who had what. And these things we just can't imagine, and I say that a bit facetiously, this could happen in our modern times, but it can. Anybody and everybody should have easily several days of extra food, extra water. They should have basic things covered. I mean, on our website, brcoalition.com, and it's interesting that, we're having this conversation today at 1 o'clock this afternoon. In fact, we have a free webinar, and they can go to brcoalition.com if they'd like to sign up, take a look at it. And the webinar goes through packing basically an emergency bag to keep with you in your vehicle at all times that allows you 2-3 days worth of some general basic items that will help you with medical situations, food, water filter, things of this nature. But it is absolutely essential, Adrian, and you pointed it out, these things can happen, and they do happen, and it may be even war. I'll say this quickly as well. October 7th in Israel, what we saw, how quickly these 20 kibbutzes and the dance festival that was going on, how quickly something as horrific as an attack from terrorists took place. And for a fact that the overwhelming majority of those people were not prepared for even something so violent as that. But we have seen in America even, as you mentioned, these breakdowns of supply lines, supply chains and such happen for months when it comes to people trying to remodel their house or build a house even. Construction, equipment, materials, the price of these things has been off the charts and very hard to get because we are a vulnerable society because of the way we function and we're set up. Great advancements, but we're still in that frail area. It's best to have the basics in place. At brcoalition.com, and what I've been encouraging as I travel and speak on this even still is spiritual and natural preparedness in 5 areas: water, food, shelter, medical, and defense. And these are things that every single one of us want every day of our lives, and it's really unwise to ignore that.
Now, I want to focus in on one aspect of what you just said there because this is often overlooked by a lot of preppers, even. I've have a lot of friends that are very much they buy ammo, they buy guns, and a particular friend of mine mentioned he was like, yeah, I have a gun, I have my ammo, I have everything there, I have my food, I have my water, but many people forget medical. And he says that if I carry a gun, I always make sure I carry a tourniquet kit because if I'm
Hmm.
willing to take a life, then I must be willing to save a life. And I thought that was a very interesting outlook that I hadn't really heard other people bring up before. So tell me about the medical aspect of this.
That's one of those things that I bring this up in my talks as well, and we talk about it in a lot of our presentations, is bullets go both ways. We just use that example. So people are thinking they're going to deal with some sort of conflict, and I'm ready to fire, and I've got this and that. But when it comes to being able to plug a hole, simply put, as the saying goes, plug a hole. Deal with a laceration, in fact. Could it be a car accident? You're driving down the road and see somebody on the side of the road, the car's turned over, whatever it might be. A friend of mine had this happen. He hopped out of the car, was on a country road, and he was able to apply some medical care as best he could until medical emergency services showed up. Having with you a kit, and these are very easy to get. There are many different areas online. I don't go anywhere without a tourniquet and a basic package of what's called quick clot, which is designed to, it's like a gauze that has a chemical on it. You stuff it in a wound, in a big open wound, a laceration, a deep cut, a knife. Could be medical, or it could be metal from a car accident or something. It could be chopping wood and cut yourself badly and need to get to the doctor. Putting a tourniquet on, stuffing the wound with something like quick clot, and then putting a high pressure bandage or an Israeli bandage type on can save a life. And you don't have to be a trained medical professional. And that's good to know what to do on that. And there are videos out there. Red Cross in many communities offer basic EMT type courses for the average person, just like teaching CPR or the Heimlich maneuver. You can teach how to put a tourniquet on, how to apply it the right way, and how to do something as simple as wrap a wound the correct way so you can save someone's life. I recommend everybody get the basics on that, and that you have with you at the very least a tourniquet and, again, as I mentioned, quick clot and something like a high pressure bandage. These trauma kit type things can be bought at a hunting store. Obviously, if you're hunting and you have an accident, you definitely want to be able to plug a hole. If you're out in the field somewhere and you get shot or someone else gets shot accidentally, you need to have those items on hand. So I highly recommend that. We teach that in our course as well at, again, brcoalition.com. We'll be talking about some of that even in the webinar today at 1 o'clock Central, is how to have these items, those very items we're discussing, in your emergency bag, because there's a lot at stake. And people need to think about this too, Adrian, is it's not just about you or me. It's about those that God has entrusted to our care.
Mhm.
Wife, children, grandchildren, and so forth, and anybody else you might bump into in public that you could be a good Samaritan to. I'm sure if the Good Samaritan in the gospel had a emergency bag with him with a tourniquet, he would have used that on the guy that had been beat up. So these are very important things to think about. Definitely the items that can save a life, and they're not that complicated. It just takes a little bit of effort on our part to take the right steps to figure out how to get them and how to use them. And that's not complicated in today's world.
No, not at all. And there's so many resources as well online that people could take advantage of. And some people may say, Doug, that we should be trusting in divine providence, and we should not be concerned about these things. We should have hope in Christ that He's going to take care of us. And so it's all these ideas, all these crazy things where we're just being conspiratorial. It's unnecessary to do this. How would you respond to that?
I would say first and foremost, to make the point, if we're going to trust God in the areas of some sort of disaster or emergency situation happens, and we don't need to be prepared because God will take care of that. Number one, let's trust Him in the other areas then on a day-to-day basis with no disaster. And don't worry about paying your mortgage. Don't worry about going out of the house to go to the grocery store to get the food, to come home and then cook it. Again, to make the point, why don't we just trust that angels will take care of our food, take care of our mortgage, take care of our electric bill, and so forth. But no, God has us in this world, live in this natural state. We have to cooperate with the way God has created the system, in the sense of we need food, we need water, we need to take care of our responsibilities and bills, and we have to work for that. Another thing to consider is if your child is hurt, then just pray over your child and expect the broken leg or the serious cut or the concussion to be fixed. But that is not something any good parent or grandparent does. You make sure your child is taken care of through the ordinary means that God has structured the world to basically operate through, and that is take them to a doctor, get them checked out. I would also add to that one more thing, and that is when we see that, again, this is not just about me. If I'm going through life, I'm ready to go, I'm just going to trust God, I'm ready to die if something happens, remember that it isn't just about you. It's about other people. It's about others that, again, God has put in the back seat of your car as you're driving down the road, those listening right now on the road. If you've got a child you're taking into to school right now, you got to think, or you're going to work right now, you got to think to yourself, I'm going to work probably because there are people who are counting on me to make sure I'm doing what I can do to provide a good living, a roof over their head, water, food, and so forth. We can trust God in a crisis and emergency, but we also have to trust that God put a brain between our ears and calls us to be part of these things. And also, if we call someone for help, we're trusting that someone's going to come who has taken the time to prepare, taken the time to learn, taken the time to train, taken the time to purchase or acquire the items that are necessary for that emergency to be dealt with. So ultimately, we say we're trusting God, but we're trusting that God will send people who've taken the natural steps to get better prepared, which is something we could do, at least in help in the interim until someone does come to help us, if in fact they do. And there are many situations we could get into. We could talk for much longer about the reality that there are examples out there that show people don't always come for help.
We are unfortunately out of time. Check out Doug Barry's YouTube channel. He has tons of content just like this. But God bless you. God love you. And we'll see you in just one moment.
I would always hear from different people at non-Catholic churches that Catholics were going to hell or that they really didn't know who the Lord was.